We are living in a computer-programmed reality, and the only clue we have to it is when some variable is changed and some alteration in our reality occurs. We would have the overwhelming impression that we were reliving the present, déjà vu, perhaps in precisely the same way, hearing the same words, saying the same words. I submit that these impressions are valid and significant, and I will even say this: such an impression is a clue that at some past time point a variable was changed, reprogrammed as it were, and that because of this an alternative world branched off.
Good afternoon and welcome to yet another edition of Free Association Radio. This is Robert Phoenix, communicating and translating to you live from the heart of Texas, where it's not quite in the torpid temperature zone just yet, but give it time. I have no doubt that we'll break the 90-degree mark yet again today. How is everyone? We are stacked. Today's show is absolutely stacked. It is a 1-2 punch of, I would say, cosmic proportion. I managed to talk with Master Mantak Chia this morning all the way live from Thailand, and it's a brief conversation, about a half an hour in length, and we cover some basic principles in his work if you are not aware of it. It's vast, it's deep, it is complex. He's probably the foremost practitioner on the planet today when it comes to energy work, energy medicine, the relationship between the body and the cosmos, the DNA. It's all in there, and it's a life and a work that's completely evolving. It's not static. He's trained in the Taoist tradition, but he corrected me in the interview, which you'll hear, and he says that it is the Yin tradition now. We'll be playing that in a few moments. That'll be first, right out of the gates. Master Mantak Chia, author of numerous books and DVDs, The Inner Smile, Taoist Sexual Practices, and so on and so on. And then after that, I had a terrific session with the philosopher and writer. He's really a magician, but he doesn't come out and say it. That's Neil Kramer, and that'll take place after the interview with Mantak Chia, which I'll be firing up and queuing up here in just a few moments. Oh, it's been a very interesting week, has it not? We started it off with the royal scam, perhaps. If you have been following the underground and or alternative media, there's a lot of buzz that what we witnessed in London on Monday was perhaps not all as it seems, that there's a chance that the royal baby may not necessarily be the immediate progeny of Will and Kate, that perhaps there was some other agency involved. There's been talk of a surrogate that carried Kate's baby for the amount of the term. But if that's the case, then why was Kate wearing, or why was she slightly pregnant, or at least looking pregnant in the postpartum or the afterbirth, looking quite like a magazine model, by the way, when she stood out there in front of the cameras and in front of the hospital. What was that little bump about? Did she forget to take off her pregnant prosthesis? Or perhaps she might even still be pregnant with yet another baby to come, potentially in September. And did the baby that they were showing the world, did that actually look like a newborn baby? Yeah, I remember when my baby was just 2 days old, and let me tell you, my baby didn't look anything like that. My baby looked very unformed. In fact, my baby actually didn't even look like my kid, as he is now. It was crazy. It was kind of a breech birth. He turned. And it was an amazing drama. This is how life is, you know. It was an amazing drama. We had planned for so long to have this water birth. I mean, we had found a midwife. We had found a place in San Diego where you could actually get into a hot tub and, you know, do this whole thing. It's like one of the few places in the world. This is where we wanted to do. We were doing hypnobirthing. I mean, we were all over this thing. And then all of a sudden, my kid decides that he's going to turn sideways, in which case it all kind of went sideways. And all the music I recorded on my iPod and all the wonderful aqueous thoughts and feelings that we had to bring our baby Pisces into the world didn't really turn out that way. So off to the hospital we went, and it was an amazing drama. We had the world's foremost expert on forceps births, and we had to use forceps to bring him out. And he was there. He was there on staff, and I guess it was our lucky day. And hence, on March 8th, 2004, our little baby Royal popped into the world. And I got to tell you, he looked like Zippy the Pinhead, because they had to use a little suction on his head. So he had this little pointy crown. And it was odd. I mean, he had this very wide nose. He looked dark. He had dark hair. And I'm thinking to myself, wow, this is really strange. Am I the father of this kid? I had that thought for about 5 seconds. It went out of my head, obviously. But as he got older over the course of the next few days, next few weeks, next few months even, let's fast forward a few months, his mom was carting him down an aisle in a supermarket. And he was a great supermarket baby. He just, he was alive. He was awake. He was aware. He was very funny. He had a smile. He would sit up, so he was, he was great. He was great in the cart. And this one woman, I wasn't there, but this one woman looked at him. This is the story that was told to me. She looked at him, and then she looked at my ex, his mom, and she said, "Oh my, what a handsome baby. Is his father from the South Pacific?" She was asking if my kid was like part Samoan. I mean, that's what he looked like when he was a kid. And now looks like a little Viking. Life is weird. And there are mysteries in the DNA. There are beings, there are lifetimes locked in the DNA. And we'll touch on that just a little bit with Master Chia here. Let me see what we got here. Let me just see. Hold on a second. I have to shut down this outside channel. It's called Facebook, that outside channel. Anyway, the buzz on the street it's not all what it seems over in Royal Land. We'll talk a little bit about the royal birth. Not a whole lot with Neil, but we will talk about it. And we'll get into this notion of privilege, of class privilege, economic privilege, bloodline, when we get into the interview with him. Tomorrow there's going to be today is the 26th. I believe it's the 27th, 28th. Mars will be exactly opposite Pluto in the sky, and this is an alignment that has not happened since the French Revolution. Mars opposite Pluto, very violent. So keep your eyes and ears peeled for more disasters. We seem to be in a disaster cycle now. perhaps the Earth's magnetics are doing a shift on us. We just had a massive train wreck in Spain, pretty tragic train wreck. Yesterday, there was a small plane in Indiana that flew a couple miles and crashed into a house. And we've had some much bigger tragedies as well. We had the Southwest Airlines plane where the landing gear just dropped out and it landed on its nose. So we seem to be in a bit of a cycle here. Keep your eyes and ears open over the next few days as Mars goes opposite Pluto. It is the intense will and desire to protect, stay secure, safe, and nurture in opposition with the corporocratic rise of the oligarch powers that be. And they are in full swing, opposing one another over the course of the next 72 hours. And of course, on the 29th, we have yet another Star of David formation in the sky. People who believe that this is a portal are giddy for yet another chance at accelerated ascension-like activity. And there are those who feel that yet this is perhaps another sign that we are coming to some kind of end-time moment in our linear experience here on planet Earth. By the way, I want to recommend a movie. The name of the movie is called Lunopolis. If you have Netflix, check it out. It's really good. It is really, really good. It is kind of a mockumentary about two guys who stumble upon this secret society and civilization on the moon. It'll blow your minds. Actually, it's low budget, but it'll blow your minds, and it's worth the hour and 15 or 20 minutes that you're going to spend watching on Netflix. Check it out. All right, let me waste no more time here. Let me get into the interview that I did this morning with Master Chia, all the way from Thailand. We're going to play this right now, and again, this is kind of a cursory sort of introduction to his work for people that aren't aware of it. So here we go, all the way from Thailand, fresh out of the airwaves, plucked right out of the airwaves through the magic of the internet and the World Wide Web in the New Atlantis. Here's Master Chia, myself, discussing his work around sacred sexual energy and more. Right now, I'd like to welcome to the show one of the world's great teachers on energy, sexual energy, chi, and a number of other energies, which you hopefully will learn about over the course of the next 30 minutes. His name is Master Chia, and he resides in Thailand, and I'm talking to him straight from Thailand right now. Master Chia, thank you again for coming to the show, and I'd like to welcome you to my audience. How are you? How are you this evening?
Fine.
Good. I wanted to get a lot of people perhaps might be interested as to how you begin your day. What would be a standard practice for you in terms of how you start your day, how you prepare for your day, the type of rituals that you will do in order to get yourself ready? Could you kind of give people a sense as to what it's like to wake up to be Master Chia and what you do to get going every day?
I mean, I always start with the inner smile. That means started to smile to the organ and smile to organ and try to get the balancing emotional by smiling, balancing the negative or positive, or called Yin and Yang, feminine, masculine energy. Okay? And that's very important in the Tao practice. You started to smile inside you and find a balance. And it's a way of communication also inside you. Okay?
So this is a conscious effort to communicate with your organs on a positive level?
Yes.
Okay.
And from that, I started to, in a laid up position, the smile, feel good, and started to feel orbit, and spiraling the orbit, and spinning the energy in the orbit. So we call the microcosmic orbit. Okay. So when I start that way, I feel the energy, and I start to get up and do a simple Taoing.
Okay.
simple Taoing practice. That means actually it's the version of the Chinese and some kind very similar like yoga practice, but more involved with the Taoing means directing the energy in the yoga, in the position of the stretching yoga position, and Taoist practice. They have a certain practice inside there.
Mm-hmm.
And then I start my day, and I come up and brush my teeth, and I go. If I have time, I do Tai Chi, or usually I teach. I just practice in the morning. I teach morning exercise. I just do the Tai Chi or Iron Church or exercise with the people.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So the morning ritual is in some ways a combination of inner yoga and meditation work, and also Taoist principle. What can you talk about?
It's called Taoing. It's not the inner. It's a Taoing practice.
Taoing.
I think that
Taoing practice.
That means is I think that this version passed to China maybe 2,000 years ago,
mm-hmm.
and the Chinese adapted many ways on that. Chinese have the separate system of the energetic meridian, channel flow, energy flow, organ channel flow. So every position they have certain meridian flow through it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. How long would it take you to do this morning practice, and is it something that can be translated into other people's lives?
Yeah.
About half an hour? Okay.
Yeah.
One of the core areas of your work is the 9 formulas, and I'm wondering if you can give a basic overview of what the 9 formulas are.
The Tao practice divide we call the inner alchemy practice. Consists of how you see every energy as an alchemy. For example, we start with the 5 elements. So we have the fire in the heart. That's one element. And then we have the fire burn to be earth. So we have earth element. That is spleen, pancreas, and stomach. And the earth, you dig down, you find metal, and that is the lungs and large intestine. And the lungs, the metal, melt to be water, and that is the water element. That is the kidney. And the kidney water feed into the wood, and it grow the wood, and the wood burn to be fire. So it's a cycle like that.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why in the whole Tao practice, we start with what we call inner alchemy practice. We start with the first step of the inner mind seeking himself is transforming. That's the first level of energy meditation, opening your orbit and connecting with your own organ and the soul and the spirit. That is the first step. So the first thing that we need to clean out the negative emotional out of the body. That's the first step. So we learn how to, we say compose the negative into the ground, or recycle it down to the ground, or we say get rid of the toxic waste material, the toxic emotional, you get rid of it, or we could delete them out. So we're using the earth as a place that can transforming our negative, and it can recycle our negative. Normal way, people either suppress it and they get sick, or they throw them out and they might end up in the jail. So either way we get trouble.
Mm-hmm.
But in the Tao said, emotional, you need to go down to the Mother Earth and let the Mother convert to be good energy. That's the first level of practice. And also in the orbit, microcosmic orbit, because everything in the universe are spinning.
Mm-hmm.
We start from the Earth are spinning around itself, 1,000 miles per hour, and move around the sun in 67,000 miles per hour. So it's very fast spinning in an orbit. So the moon spin around the Earth, also make an orbit.
Mm-hmm.
And that it come out to be 28 and a half days. and the Earth spin around the Sun is 364.5 days. So, and the Tao believe that everybody born with one energy floating in the body, and if we go down into our cells and go from the cell into the atom, very small, and you go deep to atom, we have proton, electron, and neutron. The electron are spinning in orbit. So that's why in the Tao say, anytime you learn how to reborn with the orbit. So when you recover your orbit again and you spin in the orbit, the orbit started to affecting, you can hook up with the Earth orbit, Moon orbit, Sun orbit, and you have more planet orbits, and you have more energy. And when your orbits are spinning inside you, you're affecting the electron spinning. So when we get sick, because the electron stop spinning and we have more proton. When we have more proton, we get sick or get pain in that area. So by introducing electron spinning in the orbit, it's producing chi. That's how the orbit, that's why it's the important part of the microcosmic orbit.
So what I'm getting here is that there is a very deep, profound sort of fusion of the cosmic on the external and the cosmic on the internal. Is that correct?
Yes, because we have orbit inside, we have orbit outside, and we have orbit in a very deep level inside us.
When you talk about the negative energy, are you referring to negative energy that exists throughout the body, or individually in, say, a select organ like the liver or the heart or the lungs?
Yeah. In the Taoism, in the Western psychology, we usually look at the brain, the behavior, what the memory. But in the Tao, for 1,000 years, we discovered that like the liver has the store the anger, jealousy, envy, frustration. So if we can learn how to forgive, forget, and let go, down to the earth, we are used to just learn how to get something like the sin. God forgive me the sin. But the whole thing is actually we haven't really get that part. I mean, but the whole thing in the Tao discover that our negative is not sin. All we have to do is recycle and balance it. So that's why the first thing, and so every organ have one very specified emotional store in there. So if you understand this, you can change them or transform them.
And which organ, because I know a lot of people in the West, in this country right now, are suffering from anxiety, either from the fact that they may be losing their job or their company may be going elsewhere, or their mortgage may be underwater and they're afraid of losing their house. So I would say that anxiety and fear are probably one of the more predominant emotions in this country right now. In which organ would anxiety and fear reside for the most part?
Anxiety stay in the spleen, pancreas, and stomach. We call worry and anxiety. Okay, it's stored in the spleen. So for first thing, we have with Signal Sound, we call doing the sound. So we do the sound and we let them go down to the earth, and we learn how to forgive, forget, and let go. And it's just like you just have to trust the earth. Like any organic garbage, if we return them to the earth, it will start to change it into compost to be fertilized. So all these things, the Taoism knows many thousand years already. So that's why when people have anxiety, all they do is very simple, learn how to let go to the earth and trust and believe the Mother Earth can give us healing power, health, and wealth. If you can let go the negative, mother can give you the wealth.
Mm-hmm.
But if you cannot let go your emotional, you're not going to make money.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Worry, anxiety, is the one that drain the energy. So people every day and night drain the energy, and they have no more energy to make money, and they're more anxiety and more. So that's why they become more and more that way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, it seems like here at this time in this country, that starting with a fundamental practice of releasing and draining the fear and the anxiety from the spleen would be a great place to start with your work. Would that be a valid assumption?
Yes, like kidney store fear.
Mm-hmm.
Kidney store fear. So if you can, very simple, rub the hand warm and cover the kidney and just smile to the kidney and make the kidney warm. Because fear don't like warm, they like cold.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's true. Whenever people are anxious, or when I've been anxious, I have felt a lack of heat in my body. So that's interesting.
Yeah, fear squeeze out all the life force out of the body.
You mentioned alchemy as part of your work, and there are people in the Western tradition who view alchemy perhaps in a medieval sense and using various metals and compounds as kind of a formula for transmutation. Does alchemy mean the same thing in your tradition? And if it's different, where is it? And if it's similar, where is the similarity between Western alchemy?
The very simple in the alchemy, we do it every day. So energy, different kind of energy is a different kind of alchemy. So we call it element. Okay. For example, when people get angry, and if somebody can talk you through the anger and turn your anger into happiness, that is the alchemy changes. There is immediately an alchemy changes. So when people hatred, and if you can turn the hatred into love, that is beginning of the alchemy.
Mm-hmm.
So the whole Tao practice in the beginning is you have to learn how to transform it yourself. For example, you have anger, how to smile to your liver, and how to the liver sound like do the shh. And when you do that, you started to feel that your emotional can transform, and you can let go, forgive, forget, and let go to the earth. And that is the way you started to learn how to transform it.
Mm-hmm. Here,
so that is the beginning of the alchemy.
In the West, we tend to look at people in terms of a relationship as either a friend or foe. They're either with us or against us, or adversarial nature. In terms of dealing with our own our conflicts as they relate to other people, the Taoist tradition or Taoyin tradition, to me, would seem that the conflict with the other is really inside of the self. Is that correct?
Yes. The whole thing is that in the Tao said, if you can smile to yourself and smile to your own organs, and you balancing and harmony your own organs, you started to see that, okay, I feel my balance, so the other energy cannot affecting you. Mm-hmm. Outside energy, if you are balancing inside and you feel good inside and you can smile to yourself, the outside thing will be different.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Cannot affecting you that much.
You talk about the use of sound when it comes to connecting on an internal level with the organs. How important is sound?
Yeah, in the Taoism, we believe that the sound, we discover the sound have every organ have a sound, and they can either tonify or it can be tonify or sedation the negative energy. So like we said, the heart sound like heart sound, and is very powerful to release the heart energy out and release the emotional of the energy out of the heart. And the liver also we call a liver sound like shh. So this sound will really release the anger, the frustration, the jealousy, the envy in the liver.
Right. Yeah, I can see that. One of the things I wanted to talk with you about today, and probably the reason why I wanted to reach out to you, is I saw your one of your videos online about orgasm versus ejaculation in the male, and you got very deeply into the energy of the male. And one of the things that I've been looking at in terms of a cultural phenomenon is the rise of the yin in the West, or the rise of the goddess. And there's so much of a preponderance in terms of our social vocabulary about honoring the sacred feminine and honoring the sacred goddess. And I wanted to ask you about the sacred masculine and how, in this time, how it's important for these two energies individually and collectively to be in balance with one another.
And in the Tao practice, we divide the energy come up from the back on the coccyx up to the spine to the brain. We call the masculine energy, or we call the yang energy. And the energy come down from the tongue down to the throat, down to the heart, down to the solar plexus, down to the navel. We call the masculine channel, or we call yin channel. So in the daily life, we always try to be have the yin yang balancing. So in the Tao said yin, it doesn't mean negative, it doesn't mean evil, it doesn't mean Satan, it doesn't mean sin. And yang or white or positive, it doesn't mean good, holy, or God. But the yin and yang, they are moving each other like the whole universe. The yin pushed the yang, and the yang pushed the yin, and everything started to spin in the orbit. So it continued pushing each other for million and billion and billion years. So what we call by yin push the yang push the yin, no beginning and no end, and no win, nobody win, and nobody lose. And that is the theory of the Tai Chi, or the theory of the yin yang. And if we started to separate, the yin is devil, is God, devil is sin, and the positive is God, and goodness, we have to make war, because you separate God and evil and sin and goodness and God, and we have to make war. And so who make the war? We are the one that making the war for the devil and God. But God sitting up there and drink tea and play chess. And that's what the Greek God showed that way. You know, the God and goddess playing chess and use the human as to make war and game to play. So in the Tao said, in this way, it never ends. We are never going to end. So we divide things so clearly, we never feel the negative and positive are balancing and moving. So the yin don't push, the yang cannot move. If the yang don't push the yin cannot move. So nothing can be moved without each forces. So that's why the whole universe, everything have to move together, yin and yang, and find balance.
You know, I just noticed that you were born on April 4th, 1944, and that's 4444. Is that significant in your tradition at all in terms of numbers? I find it really fascinating. Yeah,
in the Taoism, we think that the 44 is a good number of we call the yin, the 44, the double 4 number. Yeah.
So you came into this lifetime blessed with all these fours, right? That's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. We don't have a lot of time left, but I did want to ask you about the process of discovery in your work. You have added greatly to our understanding of energy and Chi and levels beyond Chi, sexual practice, your gifts and contributions have been immense today. I don't see you slowing down at all. Where are you in your work? What is the process of discovery like for you in adding new facets or new ideas to the great body of work that you already have accumulated and continue to work on? What's that like for you?
It's very interesting that I learned very traditional Tao, alchemy, internal work, and all these things. But I have a chance to come to the West and learn the anatomy, astrology, science, and all these things. And it's so interesting that the more the science discover, the more I understand the Tao. And that's why every day, when I read a science book, astrology book, and all these books, and I discover so much and understand so much, everything more and more. For example, we say, why the orgasm without ejaculation? That if they discover that, that means the traditional, they discover when you have love and orgasm, and you have that, you started to make yourself feel very good, and you feel you connecting more to the force of the God. And the other thing is like, now in the West also discover that the DNA renewal need orgasm, arousal, orgasm, love, and compassion. And that's what the Tao talk about. When you feel love, arousal, orgasm, compassion, it's creating a wave. They measure up 8 hertz. And this 8 hertz, when it vibrating out, it activates the earth force, and it make the DNA of our DNA split out and reunite and make a new cells. Mm-hmm. How important our making a new cells? Because making new cells is our life. If a human stop breaking out, making new cells in a few days, we die. So that's why arousal, orgasm, love, and compassion, that's what we need. And that's what we call bliss and ecstasy. But have to come from sexual energy. Mm-hmm. And the love.
So to summarize what you're saying is that your ongoing process of discovery is taking you even deeper into the cellular anatomy and understanding its ramifications and impact on the DNA itself. Is that correct?
Yes, because that's the science discovered, but we also discovered that. That means the West, they already discovered, the East discovered that this practice, it makes you so good to bliss, feel ecstasy, feel all these things. But the West also discovered that.
Interesting. Well, are you going to be coming to the United States anytime soon to share more of your teachings directly with people here?
I got back.
You're just back. Okay.
I got back.
And is there anything that you're working on currently, either a new book or a DVD?
Yeah, I'm working more deeply in the stem cell activating Qigong, which the Tao discovered that the stem cell, or we call the original cells, the stem cell or original cell actually is the innate energy, innate mind power and good will and energy to run. Mm-hmm. And that's why oftentimes we don't have enough energy. The stem cell cannot not active. It dormant. Mm-hmm.
So the stem cell is your new domain.
Yeah, the stem cell and the pulse that we call the life pulse therapy. Mm-hmm. Because the pulses, we have pulse since the beginning, before the heart pulsing. Okay, we have the pulse in there before the heart pulsing. So this pulse in the Tao for a long time always talking about the North Star. So the North Star, now there are many scientists when do research, so they make me understand how to ask the North Star extending the life. Like the North Star have a pulse, like twinkle, twinkle, little star. When the North Star pulse, it started to pulse a simple protein and make a first life in this world. Now, the scientists also discovered that our heartbeat affected by the Earth pulse. But now there are more studies that the Earth pulse affected by the North Star pulse. So that's why the pulsing is life. When a doctor touch a person's pulse on the neck and then pulse, that means you pronounce death. That's simple. So in the Tao said, if you can hook up with the pulse and you make the pulse pulsing, and you extend your life. Okay. So when we do meditation, we have to feel all the pulses, like the crown, the palm, the bubble spring of the feet, the navel pulse. All this is original pulse. From the beginning, before the heart pulse, all these pulse are really pulse.
Well, that's absolutely fascinating. The relationship between the pole star, the North Star, and the Earth, almost creating like a circuit together. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah, fascinating stuff. Well, I know that you have a limited amount of time today. I'm really grateful for you to be able to come on and share some of your insight and your work. And the next time you come back to the United States, I'd love to have you back on and talk about astrology, because part of what I do is in the astrological realm, and maybe we can talk about astrology and energy. I'd love to do that. So thank you very much, Master Chia.
Yeah, thank you.
And if you people want to...
Astrology is my one of my specialty, but it's more in the what we call we look at the person,
right,
and more emphasize in the organs, because in the Chinese they will divide what organ, what day, what born, what energy. When you born with the energy, you see, if you look at that way, yeah.
Okay. Well, I'd love to have you back on and have a more in-depth talk about that. If people want to find out more about your work, they can go to mantakchia.com, and you're the author of Taoist Secrets of Love, The Inner Smile, Cosmic Fusion, and just a treasure trove of DVDs. So, Master Chia, I want to thank you for being on the show and also for all the work that you're contributing to our planet during this time.
Thank you.
And that was from this morning, just a little over 2 hours ago, in my my dialogue with Master Chia. Lots of interesting information in there if you're not familiar with this work. You know, my chat room is so alive and turned on. It's amazing. They're having a dialogue about Master Chia's work. There are people in there that have practiced some of his techniques. It's a testament to how advanced the people in my chat room are. I think I might have the smartest chat room on Blog Talk Radio. I'm going to come right out and say that right now. I'm going to throw down. I challenge any other Blog Talk host to come at me with their chat room. Not really. We're not in conflict here. But that's how I feel. That's how strongly I feel about them. And by the way, happy birthday, Miss Jody. She was not in the chat room today, but she would normally be here if it were not her birthday. Also, happy birthday to my man, Darren Williams. Jody and Darren Williams share the same birthday. And Darren Williams, of course, the prolific author, blogger, researcher. You can find him on Planet X and a bunch of other sites. He's going to be delivering a new piece to my website, and wishing him a very, very happy birthday. Today is also the birthday of Mick Jagger and Carl Jung. It's the Two of Clubs. That's what today is, the Two of Clubs. The conversation card. And it happens to be my card as well, albeit a different day. But happy birthday to two dear friends of this program and my blog. Okay, so let's move on to the second part of today's Power Pack show. This is a conversation that I had with Neil Kramer 2 nights ago. This was on Wednesday night. And just to set the stage, he's in Portland. I'm in Austin. It's the first time we've ever spoken before, and I believe it was Pam Ella who really was the person that put a lot of energy into me bringing Neil onto the show, and it looks like he'll be back on at some point again soon, too, because we really clicked, and you'll hear this in the interview. Okay, so this is myself and Neil Kramer from Wednesday night, going from the east to the west. My first guest today is author, and philosopher, and meta-thinker, Neil Kramer. Neil is the author of the new book, The Unfoldment, and he is here by popular demand. He's one of the guests that you have asked me to interview. And here he is, talking to me live from Portland, Oregon. Hi there, Neil.
Hey, how you doing? Good to be with you today.
It's great to have you on. I'm glad that we could meet here in cyberspace together. How are you liking Portland? You used to live in England. How do you like it there?
It's great. It's really good. It's I lived in New York for a year, and then I sort of traveled around a bit and got over to the Pacific Northwest, and I can understand why people come here. It's California, Oregon, Washington, great part of the world, but this town in particular, Portland, is very supportive of the independent-minded individual, and so it's good. There's a lot of interesting things going on, and you're never too far away from nature as well, so you get in the car for 10 minutes and you're in a forest, so that's quite a nice balance for me.
In Portland, if people are into food at all, they know that Portland is pretty high up on the foodie circuit, and there's a lot of great breweries and wineries there.
I'll tell you what, I've put a few pounds on since I come here. I'm trying to work it off this summer, but it's very, very easy to do in Portland because there are so many wonderful restaurants and cafes and microbreweries and all kinds of stuff. So yeah, just the very hobbit-like activity of enjoying our food and drink along with our philosophy and our pondering, they do go rather well together.
Well, it seems like embedded in Portland is the seed in some ways of a new culture that is reverting back to some very interesting values like farm to table and taking a lot of pride in crafting home brews or wine. Can you talk a little bit about that kind of culture, especially as it is sort of clashing in some ways or rubbing up against this, super oligarchic, corporocratic industry that we're all staring down right now?
Well, it's an interesting sort of parallel, really, because on the one hand, you've got all these people. I mean, I've just been in downtown today with my friend, and we had a bit of lunch together, and we're chatting away and watching the world go by and considering our society as it walks past us, past the window. And on the one hand, you've got people kind of with the head in their Apple phones and their Samsung phones, and there's this corporate culture that is instructing people what to do, what is cool and what is not cool. And then on the other hand, you've got another kind of person, and sometimes it's the same person superimposed who's, in Portland there's a lot of people with beards smoking pipes, and they are trying to source all their nutritious things for their life locally. So not only are they getting their beer and their chicken and their potatoes, but also their art and their music and their theatre. They're trying to choose it locally in the community. So it sounds very sort of granola-ish, this, if you know what I mean by that. But it actually sort of has some meaning and substance in Portland, because there is a very human culture that is starting to capsize the corporate machine culture a little bit. And it's sort of turning the tide, I would say. So a lot of kids in Portland are looking at what is the organic human culture rather than what is the culture through the screen. Yeah,
that's what it feels like to me when I tap into Portland or another place very similar, Boulder, Colorado. There's a very sympathetic vibe going on there.
And I'll tell you one other element that feeds into it as well, and this is kind of a big hour's conversation itself, so we'll do this in 1 minute as we move on to other things, but the weather system is very conducive to introversion here.
Yes.
So you get 3 months of sunshine, And then the clouds come, and they stay like that for 6 bloody months here. So you get all of, September, October, November, etc., etc. On it goes. And that has an effect on the human psyche. And it fosters a certain environment where one is naturally more introspective. Whereas if you're baking in the desert of New Mexico every single day, it tends to produce a more extroverted impulse in that your preponderances are focused on the outside of life. Whereas here, people tend to do the reverse. So I think the actual weather system has a sort of, correlating effect on one's tendency to look inward.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Are people there in Portland concerned at all about Fukushima?
No. It's like it was yesterday's news, whatever, let's get on with it. Some people are, of course. There's groups who lobby and try to recognise what's going on and measure the event and look at its ongoing ramifications and try and make sure it never happens again. But no, I would say in my personal experience, speaking for my circle of friends, which obviously is a very small minority of people of Portland, no, not really.
Okay. Well, you used to live in England, London, I'm assuming, and there was a...
Manchester it was, actually.
Manchester, okay.
I was up in the north, but yeah, I've been to London, many times, yeah.
Big fan of the Stone Roses, Ian Brown, and the whole factory music scene.
Goodness me, well, there we go, I was right next door to that, yeah.
Yeah, it's a great time to be alive back in the late 80s in Manchester, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But a global event just occurred, one that sent shockwaves all around the planet. We were all waiting with bated breath, and the new baby royal, apparently his name is George Alexander Lewis.
Yeah.
It's interesting, George, King George was the same, he was king when the United States was, of course, going toe-to-toe with the Brits in the American Revolution. Here we have George coming around again. Just wondering what sort of thoughts you have around this in terms of being outside of it all right now.
Well, the first and foremost thing, to bring to the front of our minds in this is that I couldn't care less, Robert. I really couldn't care less about what they're doing in England in the royal family. So on a personal level, I hope everybody's happy and healthy and congratulations are in order, just like it would be with any other human beings. I have mixed feelings of it. On the one hand, I think, is it possible that a real, authentic human being can flourish in the confines of the Saxe-Coburg family? And I sort of always feel sorry for people who are pulled in, like Diana Spencer and Kate Middleton, and now this kid. And I have a human compassion for those beings, those entities, and thinking, I wonder what's going to occur. I wonder what kind of life you're going to have. I wonder what you're going to witness during that. But what an adventure! What an incredible adventure! And then one's filters and different esoteric lenses come into play, and we noticed that the kid was born on a supermoon. The father, William, was born on summer solstice. The mother, Kate, was born during a lunar eclipse. So I don't need to tell you this, Robert, but these kind of families don't take these matters lightly. And it has been known before in medieval England that babies' births would be held back or brought forward to coincide with celestial alignments for all kinds of magical and occult reasons. This being a completely neutral magical act, but the energy that is lent to the child in these circumstances, again, all about this, but it's very significant to 21st century English rulers, just as it was in the days of, John Dee and Edward, what's his name, and all those people. It's very much still the same today.
Yep.
So the correspondences between human consciousness and planetary consciousness, solar consciousness, lunar consciousness, are very, very well understood in the secret circles of those institutions. So if one cares to, you can certainly map out all kinds of interesting projections for the next 7 years for this young child, George Alexander, did you say? And we can tell certain things about the little guy. But to be quite honest with you, there's so many other things going on right now that I'm not really focusing an awful lot of attention on that, other than to say, if we're talking about, human beings here, and we're not going to worry too much about reptilian shape-shifting lineages and get the David Icke books out or whatever, if we just imagine for a moment that they are just people in an old, strange family, then good luck to them. Maybe they can do something different and change some old patterns and introduce a little bit of humanity into what they do.
Mm-hmm. Well, I thought it was rather interesting that in the United States, there was almost like this simulacra of reality that was going on. Here we had Kanye West and Kim Kardashian.
Oh, goodness me, yeah.
Right, they were pregnant at the same time, and there was this kind of dual narrative running back and forth. And it was fascinating to sort of put the two up against one another, because here you had a mixed-race relationship with Kim Kardashian and Kanye West, and an out-of-marriage, out-of-wedlock child. And then across the ocean, of course, you have this perfect personification of two Anglo-Saxon people, married, having their children in the quote-unquote right way. And there is an interesting kind of mirroring going on. And in fact, I believe Kim Kardashian had her baby moved up 5 weeks, or she had it early because, I'm not saying she had it early because she didn't want to compete, of course, with Kate Middleton, but there was a space where they would have their own experience. But this is what we were seeing here: one vision of America and one vision of England, and it's kind of a strange reflection, and something that I think we're trying to kind of work through and digest these things on some level, so they don't stick to ourselves anymore.
Yeah, I mean, it's very fascinating if you just examine the themes that are chosen through the corporate media. It's the very primal themes to do with birth and death and race and ethnicity and religion and tradition and conservatism with a small c, and it's the meta themes, the memes are being offered up for discussion in the around the water cooler and at the various offices and crossroads and factory floors. The Ford workers and the Wall Street bankers are being asked to consider the importance and the relationship between Kim Kardashian and Kate Middleton, and to say, are these significant women in the modern culture? And of course the answer is no, they're not at all. They have very little significance in the modern culture, because that culture is not our culture. When I look at that, I don't have any relationship to that whatsoever. It's imperial culture. So when you look at modern culture, whether it's Mozart and Beethoven or Rembrandt and all these fine artists, painters, literary geniuses, whatever, most of that stuff, with a few exceptions from the early 20th century, is the culture of the empire. So what you're witnessing on the television, and from Apple and Sony and Samsung and 21st Century Fox and Viacom and all those companies, is imperial culture run by 6 organizations in Los Angeles and New York. That is imperial culture. It's the culture of Egypt. It is Egyptian resonances in a modern world. It's not the culture of the people. And the irony in this is that it's actually our black brothers out there, thank goodness, who through things like blues and jazz, blues in the 20s and 30s as it developed, and jazz in the 30s, 40s and 50s in Chicago and New York, who actually brought forward an incredibly paradigm-cracking culture. It is not imperial culture at all. It is not the culture of the empire. It's the culture of people, real people. And that's a very, very recent development. So as people looked at Europe and thought, no, we don't want to be oppressed by slavery and by, inhuman taxation. We'll go to this new land, create a new society with our own choice of beliefs and our own choice of rulership. As imperfect as it was and is, it's a hell of a lot better than Europe. So when they look back now, a lot of people in America don't know how lucky they are not to have experienced thousands of years of being crushed by monarchy. So I have a rather sort of, pagan view of the monarchy, in that they've not really helped ever anywhere that I've ever seen. And that makes me look at people like, Miles Davis and Bill Evans and Art Blakey and, all these kind of musicians, to think what they did in these smoky little clubs, as much as they were having issues in their personal lives, was deconstruct imperial culture completely and put forward a new resonance that is people-orientated. And that's only happened for the first time in thousands of years in the last century. And I think that's very, very interesting.
Absolutely. On the subject of race, since we're lightly touching on it and dancing around it, we are still in the smoldering backfires of the Trayvon Martn and George Zimmerman experience. And what I wanted to ask you about is this whole idea and concept of the other, and how we are in some ways on this witch hunt to confront the other, whether it's black or whether it's white, or whether it's the banker of the 1%, or whether it's the Zionist organ dealer, whatever that is. We're in the hunt for the other now, which seems to be aligned with some kind of quest for truth and justice. I'm wondering what your take is on the Trayvon Martn, George Zimmerman theater as a manifestation of that, and this whole concept of the other, and what we're trying to really get at here, Neil.
Yeah, I think that the first thing is a very practical one, which is that having failed miserably with trying to change the Second Amendment, the current administration, under higher orders, of course, nothing to do with Obama and Biden, under higher orders, are desperate to pull back things like stand your ground, the castle laws or whatever they're called, and change that from another very resonant issue. So like we had Sandy Hook, now Zimmerman is going to be used just in the same way that mass shootings are, to say we've got to do something about this gun violence. So an unarmed black teenager was slaughtered so tragically. We've got to make sure this never happens again, and that meme gets put through it. So that's a very practical thing. On a more sort of strategic level, it also is absolutely promoting division between human beings, between one human and another, to say, well, for black people, your enemy is people who are not black. And for white people, it's these. And for Hispanic people, it's these. And for red and yellow and Alaskan people and brown people and this people and that people. These are the setups. These are the dichotomies. These are your adversaries. These are the opponents. Here are the teams all playing each other in this league for dominance. And pick your team. Pick who you're going to play for and pick who you're going to batter, who you're going to beat down. And that is absolutely being put forth. And as I said recently to some of the people who listen to my work, that as a European coming into America, obviously you have a slightly different take on things. And the level of what I would describe as inverse racism on this Zimmerman Martn case is incredible. And I find it just staggering that such overt racism for black people is being put forward by what are ostensibly civil rights groups who just to me seem to be sort of widening this chasm between the equality of human potential and the human soul And the obvious differences between races and cultures and ethnicities, of course they're different. That's the beauty of human beings, and that's the beauty of our fabulous Earth. All these different continents producing all these different kinds and colours of people with all totally different setups biologically and chemically and genetically and psychically and extra-dimensionally, I would say, that every race is designed to bring forward unique gifts, all of them very complementary, and at their best when they are taken in as a whole, to understand all those continental attitudes and all those solar reflections echoed in each different race, and to suggest that we're all the same is a very dangerous and ignorant meme to put forward. So it's not about social justice, it's about sort of homogenizing and standardizing the human being, which is a very stupid and dangerous thing to do. So I have very little faith when I see this division being boldly trumpeted from anywhere, whether it's white or, you know, Hispanic or black or this or that. I just don't care at all. I have very little time and patience for people who are clearly putting forward racist, divisive tactics, or are being used through their own ignorance. Like, well, I'm not even going to name names because people get very upset easily, but people who think they're doing something good and actually they're just serving to, foment unease and distress, particularly at economically difficult times. So this whole tinderbox is being sort of primed, ready for a spark that will be thrown in at the most appropriate time. So we have to be careful that we don't fall foul of what is also sought to be achieved here, which is where we feel we can't talk about these issues for fear of being branded a racist, which is silly, because anybody who's done any sort of metaphysical work, inner work, spiritual philosophy, anybody who's worked on themselves, the very first thing you realise is that we're essentially all the same. But that is at a soul level, yeah? And it's kind of stupid to imagine that a brown person or a yellow person or a black person or a this person, it's kind of stupid instantly to imagine that anybody's kind of better than anyone else. To me, it's like saying, well, red's better than blue, yellow's better than green. Well, don't be stupid. How can they be? They are different. They're not the same. But that is life. That is the spectrum of human consciousness, the spectrum of race, reflecting that soul resonance, right? Mm-hmm. So we know that. So to be patronized by the media to say, are you fighting for justice for Trayvon Martn, or are you siding with the establishment view that racial profiling is okay? We have to stop doing either of those things. They are both silly, right? The question of justice doesn't even come into it for me at the moment. That's something down the road. The question of profiling, I would argue, every single person who is listening to this has lived as a human being successfully by profiling people all the time. That's what we do. That's how we live. We profile people to understand who they are, what they do, what they're good at, what they're bad at, the level of danger, the level of love, the level of creativity, the level of intelligence, the level of musicality, the level of emotional adeptness, everything. That's what we do. We judge all the time to the best of our abilities what is in front of us. So to suggest that we shouldn't profile is crazy, absolutely crazy. Again, it's a nonsense. And that this is being put forward as the argument is a shame, because there's a lot of white people and black people and Hispanic people who care about these issues but are not confident enough to say, hang on a minute, the argument that's being put forth on the television, on CBS and NBC and BBC and The Guardian and The Washington Times, is a very bad frame for this. It's a very poor concept to say, do you want to do this or do you want to do this? And it's very crude that we're even thinking in these terms. It's like suddenly we've lost 50 years of wisdom here. Mm-hmm. Somebody needs to say, hang on a second. We all know that judging on race is not something we're in a position to do. We can barely judge who we are ourselves. who we are, what we're doing, what we're capable of, where we came from, where we're going. We can barely know that for our inner selves, and that is the mystical journey of a lifetime to even begin to get a handle on that. So don't imagine for a minute that you're ever in any position to judge where someone else is at or what they're capable of, okay? That judgment is never ours to make. However, what you can do is observe what is. What do people do? What do they not do? How do they behave? How do they look? What do they listen to? What do they read? What do they eat? How do they smell? How tall are they? How small are they? That's what is. There's no judgment involved in that. It's just observance. And we're being asked to stop doing that and just to consider everybody as these sort of simulant, androids. And everybody's just this colourless, grey man. Everybody. That's what they want us to consider our global society as. And I think it's wrong to do that. And when I say they, let me be specific about who I mean. I'm talking about think tanks who engineer social trends. So one of the trends that's being asked of our global populace to be considered is that you have to choose which team you're on. Right. And the very first thing we should do is reject the whole idea of that and say, no, there are no teams here. There's no racial teams. There's no opposition, and there's no adversary. The adversary isn't the black man or the white man or the thug or the overzealous person or the aggressive person or the submissive person. It's people who don't augment and hold a space for human beings to have their own culture, which is corporate culture. The corporate institutions who are instructed to behave in a certain way by think tanks. And that's been going on for 200 years. There's nothing conspiratorial about that. That's how it works.
Well, one of the things that really pops to mind when you talk about this dichotomy is that for individuals within these groups, whether they're black or whether they're white or whether they're brown or male or female, that there has to be some break from the group consciousness. So that the individual has its own response to the situation, because the group consciousness at times can be taken away and swayed by momentum and a different type of signal that's being played. And it gets back to something I read in one of your essays about the difference between the individual consciousness versus the group consciousness. And I think what we're talking about here, Neil, is that this homogenization, this corporatization of consciousness and identity and ego all being sort of bolted together into this almost Frankensteinian monster that's being ordered around. And I think that you really hit on something when you talked about the group consciousness versus the individual. And what does it take for somebody inside of a group that supports them to step back and to step away, whether it's black, white, or brown, that this is not right? I want to have a different understanding or a different perspective on this. What does that take for the individual to do?
I think the first thing one has to do is realize that your judgment is as good as anybody else's. So when you judge a situation, is this flame going to burn my hand? We don't really question our own judgment on that. It's like, well, yes, don't know, or no. Those are the three options, right? And as you get further in life, particularly between the ages of 14 and 21, which is a very important sort of mystical cycle in a young man or a young woman's life, the education system is specifically designed to remove one's confidence in one's own judgment, particularly for philosophical and ideological and political matters. So the very first thing to do, and if people were coming to my mystical college, would be something we'd be doing right in year one, is to reintroduce the idea of one's own sovereignty and one's own authority over our own life. So whenever a group puts forward and say, look, these are the choices, these are the candidates, these are the issues, you immediately take that piece of paper and throw it in the trash can and say, they're not. Don't you tell me what the issues are, who the candidates are, what the options are. This isn't a multiple choice life. It's not this, or this. It's a totally freeform. It's totally analog. So it's a very basic thing. And when they have polls, you know, have you ever looked at a poll and thought, well, none of those answers are right, really, but I'll have to put a little tick in one of them. And then you look at the results and you think, well, you know, that's just skewed, really. That doesn't really tell us anything. And they do this on the television and in the newspapers every single day. They try and corral our creative, problem-solving, exquisite human consciousness into this very sort of rodent-like yes or no, left or right. And I think it begins with confidence to say, if you really care about social justice, then you must first of all turn to personal freedom. And that is a spiritual path. You cannot fight for social justice and social equality if you do not in yourself have an equality of being, an equality of existence, and a deep understanding of what it is to be a human being. So the people who are fighting for social justice are very ill-equipped to do it, because in my understanding of it, and we can rip out any sort of religious thing right from the start, if you don't have a wise, deep, spiritual path, a history and a chronology of attainment in your own insight and your own understanding in life and in existence, metaphysically, philosophically, you are in no position to understand what social justice even is, let alone fight for it. So what I see when I see these frothing people of all races and all types, all nations, fighting for something that they don't know what it is, rather like the 19-year-old troop in Afghanistan who don't really understand why they're there and what they're doing. All they know is they are fighting, and it's better than doing nothing in their mind. So the first question is, establish your reference points, know the parameters, establish what words are, what are we talking about? What is this justice? Is there equality here? And what does it mean? And I don't think anyone's in any position to do anything about that until you begin to examine the world, the truth of it, and this is my personal view. There isn't any justice in the world by design because it's absolutely unnecessary. Justice is a stupid, moral, human conjuration. It doesn't exist in the universe because it's unnecessary. There are no bad things and good things as such. Things are created and destroyed as a cycle of life. And what we're talking about here is, how do we establish harmony in that? So like in a forest, or like in a woodland, or like in a meadow or a river, there is a cycle of creation and destruction, birth and death, coming and going, manifestation and dissolution. So it is in society. And until we can begin to understand that justice is a phantom, rather like the terrorist, then we're pursuing ghosts here. So we need the philosopher in amongst the policymakers, and of course that's the last thing that ever happens. You have people like Dianne Feinstein and unfortunates like that involved in it who are not in any position to know about the world. They know nothing about the world, and that people like that are shaping policy and influencing law is just a tragic comedy which we have to laugh at. And while we're laughing, design the alternative that does not require any kind of sanctioning from an outside source. It's we human beings, we human culture makers and creators and composers. We're the ones who do that. And until we start doing it, then in my view, we get everything we deserve.
Absolutely. Well, there's an awakening process that seems to be taking place right now. Some might debate that. Some may say we're just moving from one trance state to the next. But there is a stirring in the human soul, and and we are in the midst of it. I think it's a very important time in terms of a major transition. And there was a pretty prophetic figure that you're well acquainted with. That's Philip K. Dick. And some of his works and some of his psychedelic reveries gave some penetrating and harrowing insights into a world to come. And he tried to understand how this this evil has come upon the world, and he really delved into Gnosticism in his own way. And I came across the 10 Major Principles of the Gnostic Revelation by Dick, and I wanted to just toss a few out. If we can manage to do this in the amount of time we have, that's great. If not, we'll just do a few. But I wanted to toss a couple out to you and just let you riff on a few of them. The first, which is really interesting, the creator of this world is demented.
I would have to agree with that. Our first challenge is to understand the word chosen there by this person, which is demented. I would say there is a very fine line between the psychotic and the mage. So if you live in a little village and all you've ever known is the village way of life, farming and agriculture and little simple things of life, the many happy, sweet tastes and sights and sounds of life, and then one day in comes a great wizard who can do things that are incredible and fantastic in the true sense of the word, then you look at that and think this person is a terrible, terrible danger to our way of life, and we must instantly kill them. And another way of looking at it is think, wow, what is that? What is that they're doing, and why didn't we know about it, and how can it help us, and what can we learn from it? So understanding what demented is, we mustn't immediately jump to the fact that that means bad. It means unstable, right? Mm-hmm. And in the Gnostic mythos, which doesn't mean fiction, it means it's a cosmological proposition put forward a couple of thousand years ago by pre- and early Christian thinkers and spiritual students. In that cosmology, or cosmogony rather, we should say, they are introducing the idea that the demiurge, the creator of this world, came into being through a kind of accident and therefore lacked the wisdom of what we would call male and female, the masculine and the feminine, the balance. And so he created a world from his position of imbalance. So he created this planet according to the divine blueprint, we might say, and it looks like it, and if you were to hover over the planet from a distance, you think, wow, what a paradise planet, and as you get close, you think, hang on a second, there's something wrong on this planet. And what's wrong is it lacks harmony. It's a planet of predation, which is unnatural. You know, the naturalist would shriek with horror at that thought, because that's what defines the natural world, is competition and predation. That is not the celestial harmonic way, in my understanding, esoterically, of this. The other defining characteristic is entropy, which is all things here move to their end, their own dissolution. That, again, is unnatural. In the celestial blueprint, the harmonic blueprint, the divine perfection, where you have this beautiful, sublime harmony of the male and the female, it's self-sustaining. This world isn't. It moves to its end and it will fizzle out. That in itself, to me, knowing deep inside, is evidence that this world is fantastic and amazing, and there's lots for us to learn here, but it isn't created by he who we would call in Gnosticism, the ineffable one, the one true God. He didn't have anything to do with this.
Interesting. Our lives stretch thousands of years back, and we can be made to remember our origin in the stars.
Well, if you conceive of the idea that the true creator, and we'll call him a he for the moment just for simplicity, he cannot see that which is not he himself. And so he can't get an objective view on his own work. So what he decides to do very cleverly is cut a little piece of himself off, throw it into the void and say, I'm going to give you the power of free will and the power to create. And that free will is yours to do with whatever you wish. And off you go, and I'll see you later. And so this little entity, this divine being who is eternal, who will return, goes into the void and creates and witnesses and participates and contributes. And as it decides to incarnate in various worlds, it does that through plant, animal, mineral, vegetable, all different kinds of things. And one of the ones is, you might say, is a human carbon incarnation. And it's very exclusive and very precious and very unique, particularly in this part of the galaxy, which was made by a lesser angel, as you might say. And it's unique. It's a fantastic thing. And the soul vehicle tracks those incarnations. And as it returns back, it shifts from the first, second, third density where we're now to a fourth density, where having a physical, robust, solid, permanent, consistent form isn't quite as important. So you have this ethereal form, this astral form, this light body, as we call it today. And then the fifth and sixth and seventh dimensions and all these amazing things. It's a very natural, fluid, organic ecosystem of life, this. Very well known in Britain. Erased, though, from memory, from society by the Romans. They erased it immediately. Gone, thank you, no, we're not having that. So all our records of this cosmology, forget Gnosticism, this is way before Gnostics. The Gnostics were just trying to preserve it, thank goodness. This chronology of universal history is well known to man. It's just been taken off the hard drive and we've lost it. It's got erased, securely erased, encrypted, erased, gone, frazzled. And so the place where it exists is in what our mystical-minded people would call the Akashic record, where it is inviolable. It is not able to be taken away. But we have to raise our game, sharpen our consciousness, increase our resonance. And by that, we can speak very fancy about that, but I just mean be better men and women and embrace our multidimensionality rather than just live as animals, which is good as well, but that's only part of it. As you do that, you start to connect with those old records, and the living records, they're like what you might think of as a holographic record. And so the best way to read that record is to be it again, connect with it directly by living it again. And that is available to all of us, and we play with it every night as we slip into unconsciousness. We go into some of those ones that have connections with what we're doing now. And one of the tasks of the mystic, one of the exciting, rewarding goals of the mystic is to bring that into conscious being, to not have it as this random roll of the dice or throw the ball onto the roulette wheel every night. Instead, you choose where to go and have a look and learn from your own history and remember it and bring it back and write books about it and talk about what it means for 21st century life. So, yeah, very, very important principle in those few words.
One of the things that really strikes me about your work is that on one hand, it really feels very closely aligned with a right-handed path when you talk about making better choices, when you talk about mediating the intake of drugs and alcohol in certain experiences. This is very resonant with the right-handed path, and yet the types of experiences that you're talking about, the types of sort of arcs in consciousness here, are anything but the right-handed path. These are very visionary leaps, and it feels to me like you found this sweet spot between both of them, and maybe that's where we are. We came, we had this real strong Apollonian run up into the 60s when we really dived into Dionysus and Dionysian culture, and maybe now we're somewhere in the middle between the two where we can choose. How conscious of you are in this dance between the left and the right in what you do?
Well, having been a member of various organizations who have studied the esoteric mysteries of our life and our planet and its neighbors, one learns through stages of initiation all kinds of interesting things which are not to be spoken about here, I'm afraid. However, to treat each other with respect and give this matter the dignity that it's due, we can talk about the principle of it, which is absolutely good enough. And that is that the first stage of initiation is about attaining discipline in one's life, Because if you gain access to the mysteries, i.e. the chronology of what we are and who we are, the truth of that begins to alter your life. It begins to transform you instantly. What you do, what you can't do. What used to be okay isn't okay anymore. You can't sit with those people and laugh and joke about football because it's lost its shine. You can't do that anymore. You don't want to go to work and put your shirt and tie anymore. You can't face it because you've seen something so majestic and so epic that you find it difficult to live as a normal human being and be a member of society, a functioning member of society. So the first stages of initiation are matters of balance and matters of discipline, to say, if you don't discipline your inner technology in the same way that we might think of somebody like Bruce Lee disciplining his arms and legs and his muscles and his ligaments and his cartilage and his bones and his mind, once that's disciplined, this tiny little insignificant Chinese man suddenly becomes the most graceful, fierce warrior in the Western Hemisphere because of one simple thing, which is he brought discipline and control to his inner technology. And that is what the initiate is asked to do before they go anywhere. And then once you achieve that, which is a good 7 years' work, at least, if you're good, once you achieve that, then you have access to both of those paths, as you put it, which is to use our reason and our philosophy and our organic computer to perceive and calculate and plan and design, and to use our other faculties for understanding that we are here in the 3D, in the physical, for a very, very good reason. So we have, as you might say, an atomic presence here, an energetic presence which is very physical, for a good reason. Many New Agers are desperate to escape that, but it's very important that we embrace it. And then as we reach out with our other faculties of intuition and instinct and extrasensory perception, we realize that those aren't coming from this 3D animal structure. They are coming from our fourth density soul structure. And so the two are operating in tandem at the same time, like the ship has a captain at the wheel on the deck, and it also has a lookout in the crow's nest who can see far and wide and has this very elevated perspective. And if those two work together, they can sail the most epic seas and the most mysterious of lands with ease. And that's what we're trying to do. That's the multidimensionality of the path. So, it's very perceptive of you to understand that those two things do have a sweet spot. And that is what we have initiation for, is not to try and keep things secret from people, because it's quite commonly out there, the knowledge. People just don't know what they're looking at. They keep stepping over it and don't realize that they've just looked at something very sacred. After that improvement stage, then you start to build up the power, like a pressure cooker, and you build up this potentiality, this psychic pressure that then you can use for all kinds of wonderful purposes. But if you're not disciplined, if you're just a flaky New Ager or an Apple Mac cultural muppet, then you're not going to be able to do anything, because you're not in a position to establish that psychic potential, that pressure. You can't do it. You cannot pressurize. You cannot create this might inside. So that's why the initiate is also asked to consider their withdrawal from the mainstream matters of the common mind, which is entertainment and pleasure and relief. Those things don't help on the path of transcendence and realization and ascendance. And we're not contributing to our best capabilities if we do that. So we're doing ourselves a disservice, and we live in escape mode all the time, always looking over your shoulder for the next unfortunate event to get you. But when you stand in that sweet spot, in that center point, which is largely what my work is about, and the consultative part of my work is what I do 75% of the time. People engage me to instruct and guide them in how we achieve that in our life. And in the 21st century, it's a unique proposition put forward to the human being. And how the hell do you do that in this crazy world? And that's always a different story every century. And again, we have a new.
That's funny. It's funny. I was going to ask you specifically about psycho-spiritual survival skills here in the early part of the 21st century. I don't know what your experience is like lately, but I'm witnessing a lot of people feeling very out of control in their lives, and walking around with a sense of almost apocalyptic dread, but kind of a disassociative apocalyptic dread. If there's anything you could share briefly with people that are listening that might give them a tool or two to deal with this chaos that we're in, what would one or two of those things be?
Okay, I'll give you a couple of things. A very powerful understanding, a very powerful truth is to know that we have these three incredible pieces of inner technology on Earth that are available to us, and they're inside of each of us. One is the mind, cogito, as the Latin would put it, and that is a very, very incredible thing, and it holds the world together, this thing. We won't go into detail. We have the heart, quono, which is connectivity with all other souls. That's what that is. Nothing to do with compassion and love and romance. Those are wonderful, but that's nothing to do with that. Your heart is a profound spiritual connectivity thing. It allows you to communicate with all other beings with that portal. It's not the organ in your body, but it's located near it. Now, we know a little bit about those two things, the mind and the heart, but there's another one that is very rarely spoken of, and this is our divinity, this is our will. In Latin, numen, N-U-M-E-N. That is the magic balance point where you start to collapse the polarity of being okay and not okay, joyous and depressed, between being robust and being feeble, forthright and yielding. The will brings those into balance. And the will is an emanation that is constantly renewing itself in you. And so however rubbish you are, however naughty you've been in life, and however sad you've been in life, this purity of will is always pristine and untainted, and you can bring it into anything you do. So that is a very important thing. And just to expand on that, every 7 years in our life, from 0 to 7, then 7 to 14, then 14 to 21, we have these regenerative cycles. So whatever age you are going to completely dematerialize, disintegrate yourself utterly. All your meat and bones will be gone. All your soul, memory, everything wiped every 7 years, and all that is taken forward is your wisdom. And so you live many lives throughout your 80, 90 years if you're lucky on this planet. Every 7 years you begin again, fresh, and that's a moment of deep purification. So at these key points, 35, 42, 49, 56, 63, 70, 77, we are born again, literally. Very old mystical truth, this, very, very important. As you do that, at those points, at those times, you get to dissolve the patterns that weren't working. You don't have to carry them with you anymore. So understanding the will as a piece of your inner technology, that divinity inside, doing a workshop on this in September, alchemy of will, all about this. Understanding these 7-year cycles of renewal gives us this constant youthfulness. Remember the magic of being 4 and 5 years old? That is carried forward. It's just that we don't activate it. And if you have that, life becomes pretty joyous again. And depression vanishes, confusion vanishes.
Well, I think that's a tonic for our times. And if you want to find out more about that weekend workshop, you can go to neilkramer.com/events. You'll find it there. It's going to be taking place at James Gilliland's property up in Trout Lake, and that's the 7th and the 8th. in September, and Neil also has a brand new book out. It's called The Unfoldments, The Organic Path to Clarity, Power, and Transformation. Neil, it's been a real pleasure speaking with you and sharing some wisdom and insight, and just keep up your stellar work. We need you for these times.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity, and please keep broadcasting all your wonderful messages. It is also greatly appreciated.
That's Neil Kramer. All right. Well, that was a rock solid 55 minutes of a pretty direct download from Neil Kramer on what's happening in the world, and of course, generating out into expansive circles, and circles extending outwards from his thoughts. Good stuff all the way. You can find him at neilkramer.com, and hope to have him back on the show again. A very interesting experience in the chat room. Neil has, I guess he has this magical power of bringing out the Christian seers in our community. Two of them dropped into the chat room. One of them got very end-timey judgmental quite quickly, and he left. And then another was talking, wasn't really talking, shouting. It's the shouting methodology of communication. Half the sentences were in caps, talking about how man has fallen and everything is a gross and utter lie in the eyes of the Lord God Creator. Look, I don't really disagree with him. I don't. Okay? Because the world that we live in, for the most part, is absolutely designed to fail. It is an exercise in futility. It is a trap. It is a hell. Okay? Let's be clear about that. Let us be absolutely clear about that. But it doesn't necessarily help matters when you have somebody who believes and feels as though they've locked into this divine current and starts shouting at you and starts telling you about the world as we know it in the kingdom of God, and does so in such a way that is absolutely, utterly uninclusive. And one of the things that I have a real challenge with, look, it's my life. I have to live with it. I have to live with the outcome, the consequences, my thoughts. I've had people on YouTube tell me that I'm going to burn in hell because I'm an astrologer. So, there is a lot going on with these kinds of end times modalities. So I guess I'll just have to take responsibility for my thoughts and feelings and peregrinations in the spirit. But one of the things that I do have a hard time with is the fact that most Christians don't give a rat's ass about the world, and that's just the way it is. And they may have some, programs where they, send money to some orphanages or some places in Africa where they, will feed people. I'm not saying that compassion and charity isn't a part of their faith and their dialectic, but they don't really seem to care much about suffering in terms of this world. Oh, it's just this world. It's just this world. We're going to get to the next world. Well, one of the reasons why this world's kind of screwed up, I think, is maybe because Christians gave up on this world. That's what I think. Maybe one of the reasons why we're in so much trouble is we've let other people and other religions and other faiths, whatever they may be, or lack of faith thereof, dominate the psychic and spiritual landscape of the planet. And perhaps Christians had more of a sense of social responsibility and accountability instead of turning the cheek and glancing upwards towards heaven. We might be in a bit of a different place. But they would say, well, this is the plan, and that it's all supposed to shake out like this, because at the end of the day, the world doesn't really matter. And what does matter is the world that's coming. So then why come here at all? Why show up? Why would a God create this place just so we could experience hell? Is it because we have to come to this realization so we can come to God in that way? Well, perhaps. I don't think that that's too far off the truth. But I also don't think that that is the totality of our experience. In the first hour, we had Mantak Chia, who is deeply exploring the sacred relationship between the body and energy, and doing it in such a way which is accountable and responsible, and it's his tradition. He's a master at it. He's good at it. He's not cheating anybody. He's not creating any kind of emotional larceny in anybody's life. Is he going to hell because he's not a Christian, because he has found a different way in which to tap into the sacred and divine source inside of himself? These are all questions that we're all staring down because the times we're in. In some ways, they demand that we look at these questions. We demand that we bring on people like Mantak Chia or Neil Kramer to talk about some of these issues and try to find a way through a difficult time in the history of the planet. But shouting at people and telling them, not even telling them, demanding them and commanding them, may not do it. It may not really work. And you know, perhaps it will all go down like that anyway. But if you are a Christian and you do feel like you have a message to share, why don't you take a page out of the book of Jesus and show a little compassion? Listen. Don't talk. Don't shout at us. If you want to share with us, oh, look at that. There we go. Hey, do you hear that? The world is saying, you're right. Pay attention. There are no accidents, are there? None at all. So don't shout at us. Talk with us. Listen to us. Open your heart. Be compassionate like Yeshua. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to play a little bit of music here. And this piece of music I'm going to play is the music of a fellow by the name of Conger Ol Ondar. And Conger Ol Ondar was a singer he was a tube and throat singer. And I first became aware of him in a movie called Genghis Blues. I guess I might have met Conger even before that at, might have been the Asian Art Museum in California. And there was a really wonderful kind of explosion of musical styles that were coming together in California, especially San Francisco at that time. And my good friend Stephen Kent, who plays didgeridoo, had a connection with a number of international musicians. And there was a fellow by the name of Paul Pena. If you've heard the song Jetliner by Steve Miller, that was Paul Pena. He wrote that song. Paul was a blind musician, and he learned how to tube and throat sing by listening to his shortwave radio at night. He would lay in his room and listen to these wonderful, magical, distant recordings of the ululations of people like Conger Ol Ondar. And he taught himself how to tube and throat sing. And he actually wound up going to Tuva to meet Conger Ol Ondar, who was at that time one of Tuva's most renowned throat singers. It's a movie I highly recommend everyone to watch. It's called Genghis Blues. And sadly, Conger Ol Ondar has passed away. He left the planet yesterday at the very young age of 51. And so what I'd like to do is I'd just like to play a little bit of his music here and give you a sense as to what he sounded like and what the response was. So maybe if I can just sneak around here and not play something that's owned by a major label record company. I found a little clip from the Letterman show, and this is from a while back. This was uploaded in 2007. So it's been on YouTube now for 6 years. And this is Conger Ol Ondar doing a solo performance on David Letterman. This is with Letterman's lead-in, and it goes all the way through, and you can hear the raucous applause. This is 2 minutes of mind-blowing vocal manipulation, and the style of tube and throat singing, Humi singing, it lives on. But Conger Ol Ondar has gone to a place where the Christians in our world are speaking greatly and loudly about. So keep on singing Conger Ol Ondar. This is Robert Phoenix. You've been listening to the Friday FARcast, and my guests were Neil Kramer and Mantak Chia. I'll be back on Monday with the Monday mashup. And that's it. Have a great weekend. It's going to be intense, but we can all get through this in one way or another. Have a listen to Conger Ol Ondar.
guest is a renowned throat singer from the Russian Republic of Tuva. And throat singing is a centuries-old art form in which the singer vocalizes, right, Paul, 2 to 4 notes at a time.
Wow.
Right. The normal singer can how many notes?
One.
One, right.
Yeah.
This man, 2 to 4 notes at a time. This is the CD. It's called Back to the Future. From Tuva, please welcome Ondar.
Ite badhana layum no